Our next chapter is focused on ensuring the right people are scheduled at the right time to ensure both the best guest and staff experience while optimizing labor costs. Jordan Boesch, CEO of 7 Shifts, will cover the challenge with scheduling based on gut and Excel, and how the right labor management analytics can drive real business outcomes and improve staff engagement. Welcome, Jordan. I look forward to our discussion today.
So just take a minute. I'll turn it over to Jordan for you to introduce yourself, and excited about the conversation today. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Happy to be here, Kelly. Thanks for having me. So just a little bit about me. My name is Jordan, the CEO at 7 Shifts, and 7 Shifts is a labor management solution geared entirely for the restaurant industry. We are, currently used by over 14,000 restaurants across North America, where we help a lot of restaurant operators efficiently manage their labor, have great communication tools for staff through mobile apps, and really trying to foster kind of a next level of engagement as it relates to the entire scheduling process.
So traditionally, and I've been in the restaurant business for a long time as both an operator and from a tech lead perspective. And your two biggest drivers of cost in a restaurant, generally, your variable costs are food and labor, but yet they seem to be the most difficult systems to implement. So why do you think that's been the case kind of over time? And how has COVID kind of changed the way we look at technology and maybe kind of simplifying that process as well too?
Yeah, I think it's always been a challenging to not just implement, food and, and like labor solutions. I think generally speaking, a lot of technology is really hard to implement. I'm sure you can talk from experience, but like, there's been, I think that's been a really tricky thing. And once you get something implemented inside the restaurant, it doesn't really talk to anything, and it doesn't kind of give you the full picture of what you really need to operate effectively. So I think, in terms of technology, it's been difficult in that sense. But I would also say that it's been a slow adoption process for things like labor management in general, because a lot of folks, there's over 70% that we surveyed are people using Excel and spreadsheets and paper. And so, you talk to those folks and, ask them how they're doing for labor and where they could improve, or if they're interested in improving. And the mindset, mind you, has changed quite a bit since then. But, not too long ago, it was kind of like, wow, I've been doing this for a long time, and this is how you do it. And this is how my dad did it, or this is how like my friend who did it, who's a chef, and so it's kind of like, it gives you a narrow picture of labor. But what I'm optimistic about and what we're seeing post-COVID is people really wanting to understand the full picture to be able to pull on different levers as it relates to labor management. And knowing that just because you did it a certain way for many years doesn't mean it was right. I think the industry was kind of on this thin, there's some thin ice. And I think COVID really shed light on that. And I think that it shed light on a lot of operators that were not being maybe as efficient as they could have been, as some of their peers were, and, having a reluctance to adopt technology. And so when I think of labor management and what we're seeing today, truthfully, our business, 7 Shifts, is actually doing quite well through the pandemic. And what we're finding is that a lot of people are using this time to say, okay, I need to rethink how I'm operating. I need to get an understanding of what I'm actually doing from a labor perspective, where I can, optimize to drive more revenue at certain times, where I don't need as many people, and also getting the right people, and trying to and ensure the communication loops are all tied together. So we're seeing a shift. If I could say that there's any silver lining within the pandemic, I would say that I think restaurants are going to come out of this, and they're going to have kind of a new perspective, or there's going to be new folks that are coming into the restaurant space that go, yeah, like I'm fresh, and I'm looking at this with a new pair of eyes, and I want to make sure that I'm as successful as the guy down the street, and what's he or she doing that I could maybe leverage.
No, and I think, I mean, thank you for that. And I think when you look at it, and having been in this industry for a long time, and we talk about it, is, technology pre-COVID was probably not top of mind. And I think, like you said, people were just, I've come across managers who say, I can build a schedule faster and better based on my gut feel. I know my business, I know my staff, I know my team. It's the same every week, and that's kind of the extent of it, right? And so the technology probably not the learning, not the hardest part of what we had to do, but really that change, right? And consistently in messages we're going through these different sessions, it's talking about, really driving change. I think COVID made people, there's a couple of things that I think it drove is change in your kind of tech landscape, realizing that some of your legacy technologies, and we'll get into a little bit, if they can't integrate with some of these new tools out there, it's really holding you back. And then, I think it's kind of that mindset of, sales cures all, kind of covers up a lot of, inefficiencies. And when you're running on thin margins to begin with, and often costs become kind of front and center when you're not having the revenues, then I think you're forced to make that change. And so, yeah, I agree. There's, a different, kind of a different mindset that's going to have to change. And the people that I think are going to overcome this strong are going to be the ones that start to invest in tech.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that, because you actually brought up a really interesting point around like the sales part of it, where you're kind of masking things with high revenues. And totally agree. I think that there's kind of like, you're evaluating technology and you're kind of like, I think the old mindset is like, will this drive revenue for my business? And if it's a cost cutting thing, like, I don't know, like really can I optimize those things? And so there is that kind of blinded, like, hey, I need to just drive more revenue without really looking at like how your systems are working. And so anyway, I just wanted to echo, like, I'm excited about that. I think it's a holistic thing. It's not just top of the funnel.
Yeah. And so, and then I think the other thing is, I mean, we all know the labor market is very challenging. Obviously with COVID, it shifted a little kind of pre-COVID, labor costs were up. The labor market was not, was tight. Unemployment was low in a lot of areas. And so really starting to engage with employees and kind of building the best teams. How can technology such as a labor management tool help continue on with employee engagement, right? And really starting to important part of how people interact with technology in the restaurants. How does that experience for employees improve through better tools as well?
Yeah, I think just to even highlight the issue that I think probably everyone that's had any experience in restaurants knows about already, which is that, there's obviously high turnover in the industry. And I think that's I think a lot of people have kind of accepted like this notion of, you know what, I'm going to turn over 120% and that's okay. And like, it's the industry and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think that there's things you could do about it. I think that there's certain reasons why some of your staff are going to leave, like they might be going back to school and can't prevent them from going back to school. But I think that there's other inherent things that can be done on the operator side that managers just aren't doing because they've just kind of used the industry as the crutch. So to their turnover issue. And the fact is, there's a lot of studies out there around the cost of a mishire, of hiring someone that doesn't truly fit from a worker perspective or like a skill set or culturally. And it's, $3,500. I know it gets higher in some, bigger establishments. And the cost of a manager turning over is about $6,000. So I think that the question I always ask restaurant operators is, if you lost that much money, if that much money of like meat or produce, like walked out of your restaurant, would you care? And would you ask questions? And they're kind of like, wow, I would check cameras. I would figure out like what happened. Did someone steal? And you're like, yeah. So did you find out why that employee left? And I'm like, well, no. And it's like, we did a study and 90% of managers do not do an exit interview as to why the employees are leaving. Like, it's insane to me. That's insane. Because like the opportunity to potentially save that employee, even though they may have been kind of like one foot out the door, like it could have been increased, is it overpay? Were they just getting paid a little bit more? And then, you didn't know about their situation, or were they really great? And, all you really need to do is pay them $1 more an hour and they'd be happy. Like what was it? Yeah. And a lot the surveys that we ran were interesting, and you would think that it's all about pay. And it wasn't in our findings. It was, the top reason was that people left was that they were quitting because of their manager or their peers. Like they just, that old saying, if you don't quit your job, you quit your manager,
Yeah.
is quite true. And the hospitality industry is no different. You know, if you get treated poorly by your coworkers or your manager, you know, you're probably very likely to leave versus someone that's being propped up and promoted and kind of praised for doing those great things. So I think that as we look at solving the problems around retention, I think it really starts from the top where that employee is being brought in. You know, do you have, it sounds, I know people think it's cheesy, but I'm just like, do you have like some basic core values of like how you want to operate?
Right.
Because that helps you hire, promote, and fire the right people. Doesn't like we have that type of philosophy in terms of our core values, and we try and make sure there's a strong fit, and we do certain things to test that early on. I think if managers did some light screening for that, they'd be in a better spot. And they'd also empower their managers a bit more to call things out when they're out of line. Instead of like, I don't really like this person for these reasons. And you kind of get inconsistency between managers into what makes a good employee, a great employee, and how to kind of foster that. So I think that the top of the funnel around getting the right people in the door is key. And once you have the right people in the door, you know, doing basic things like even just having check-ins with them is important. You know, every month, you know, just sit them down for 15 minutes. Say like, how's it going, Sarah? How's it going, John? Like, how are you liking things? Like, are you challenged? Are you getting along with your coworkers? And by the way, here's some feedback that I think you can do to, you know, improve on, to make you better. And those like touch points, I think people don't put a lot of emphasis on them because they don't think they're important, but they actually are. Shows them that you care and that you're invested in them, even if they're with you for a short period of time and they're a teenager and they're learning. Like, people want to learn. And I think that's something that restaurant operators need to understand. And I think the savvy ones do understand, is kind of fostering learning is something that millennials are looking for. I'm a millennial, so I can say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And constant feedback, right? I mean, I think that's important. Yeah. And I think, you know, you get caught into not this thing of, you know, I think people tend to shy away from those discussions because they're worried about having a courageous conversation if there is development opportunities. And, you know, what I've always tried to instill with people is like, I'd rather know, and you can say it in a positive way that helps, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a disciplinary, like, you know, you suck at this. It's, hey, let me help you get better. But like people inherently want to learn and grow, and they're not gonna know what they're doing wrong if somebody doesn't help them through that you know, that journey of kind of improvement, right?
Absolutely. And you've got managers that are like a lot of like first-time managers, right? Like in the restaurant industry, because it's people that have been in the industry for a while since they were younger, and they're, you know, getting promoted into management roles. And so they're, you know, it's important to try to equip them with some basic tools to try and like help them do their job more successfully. Because if they're being promoted, I'm assuming you thought highly of that individual. And if you want that individual to be successful and to take, you know, weight off your shoulders as a business owner, you should try to empower them with some tools that they can do, like one-on-ones, or you know, just where they can have those conversations open and honestly. So I think that's a big change, and it's something we've, you know, just thinking of like how we run our company and how we work things into our product and platform is really around like our engaged product is supposed to, you know, try to highlight folks that are doing really well, and like using certain qualitative and quantitative metrics around that to try and say, here are the most engaged folks, and here's why. And by giving that to a manager that's a new manager, they can say, Kelly, like, amazing, you're upselling your people, like, you know, peers like working with you, you're always showing up on time, you're picking up shifts for others, like you're just killing it. And you know, the manager's free to build contests or whatever around that, and maybe they pick someone in the month that's like doing the best, and they want to give them like a gift card or something. You know, we want to just try and give managers the data to make those decisions. And if folks are becoming less engaged, how can you nip that really quickly? And is it something that's correctable or not? And so I think that that's philosophically how we and I view just business in general. But I think that as it relates to, you know, our product, that we try and make sure that we're giving them the insights to help them do that.
No, and I think that's amazing because, first of all, people just love to be recognized, whether it's just a thank you, an attaboy, how are you doing today? A simple hello, right? And I think people forget, like, and I probably, I've probably done it myself. You're busy in the morning, you've got a million things going on. You might have had a call in the car, this is what offices were open, and you walk into the office and you go and you sit at your desk and you walk by people without saying good morning. You might not think of a big deal about it, but as a leader, people look at it like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Or, like, oh, she's in a bad mood today, and it starts them off on the wrong foot, right? So just those simple little things go such a long way when you're leading teams. And I think figuring out how to then empower people then to build upon that with data and insights through some of the technologies that you can implement within the restaurants to really help those managers kind of guide themselves, through those people conversations, I think is really important. I think data is, really, when we talk about insights, and we go back to kind of the old way of scheduling on a spreadsheet, right? You're missing so many key data points when you're starting to measure then the, effectiveness of that schedule. And so talk to me a little bit about, why when you're looking at scheduling, why like punch information is so important, why those connections of all those kind of data points within a restaurant can really start to drive more frictionless experience for the managers and the employees, but then really start to use the power of that data to really optimize your labor within the restaurant.
Everyone kind of looks at, I think, optimizing labor a little bit differently. And there's no right or wrong. I'll kind of start by saying that. I think that you got to probably look at what are the indicators of success for your business and build and manage to those. And for some people, they look at the business, they look at it from like a raw labor percentage. Like if they hit this weekly, they're good and they're comfortable with that. Some folks get really granular. They go by the hour. We need to be hitting this sales per labor hour, and it needs to be this by the end of the day. And if it's not, like, we need to be alerted in real time that we're not hitting our targets. And so, there's a variety of data points that are going to help people build out their schedules. But I think that the approach, if people aren't doing it today and looking at data as a way to optimize, I think doing that exercise of, first of all, I think just use an online platform just so you have the information in front of you of like how you're performed. Make sure it integrates with the point of sale, because that's when you'll get like the actual data. And just look at how you're doing, because that's like the first step for people. They're just like, I don't know if I'm doing good or bad. I don't know what my labor percentage is. I don't know what I should be shooting for. And just by seeing it, that should be a starting point of a discussion of what levers you want to start pulling and what things matter to your business. And some burger chains are like, what? Our order sizes are all relatively the same, and they all have a burger. And so we want to look at burgers as our unit of driving. And we want to look at that as kind of like our unit, because we figured out all the other stuff. But as it relates to using that to build the schedules, that's kind of what we're going to rally around. And so I think it's easy to get inundated with a lot of data. That's why I always encourage folks to just take a step back and think about what are you really trying to optimize for here, and what are your success drivers? Because if you know that, now that you have it in front of you, if you know that you drive more business at certain times with certain items, and those are low cost items, and you think by adding another person, you could double that, but you're only increasing your labor spend by 1.2x, but you're getting double the rate. Like, you have to go through that mindset and try things. And if you tried and it works, and you did double it, and you didn't increase your labor costs actually, went down because your sales offset it. Like, that's a learning that you can then take and kind of extrapolate. So I think it starts just by like seeing it first, seeing the data and understanding it. And when I talk to people about labor scheduling, right, and the data and kind of what it can drive from a decision-making perspective, I think one of the mistakes people try and do is they go from like 0 to 100 all at once, right? And all of a sudden I want to go from my Excel spreadsheet to a labor scheduling tool with full forecasting, full optimization, you want kind of the holy grail.
and it's a process to get there, right? Because the models have to learn the technology, especially if there's kind of machine learning and some intelligence built into it. You got to go through the process and through the journey, and it's not a 0 to 100. Do you see a lot of people going down that path of like, they quickly abandon the technology because it might not get to, some end result that they might have in their mind that might not be realistic?
Yeah, I definitely see it. We try as best as we can as people are trying any product, just like ours, like Seven Shifts, where they say, yeah, we want all the capabilities, we want the bells and whistles, and like, that's good. But the point you just highlighted, which is like, you don't even know what you're doing today. You don't even know what's good.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what's good, then like, it's going to be a learning experience, and that's okay. Because you're making the right first steps. But some people come in guns a-blazing, and like, the fact is there's some really interesting tech out there. Some of the stuff that we do around machine learning to try and understand, when people are scheduled and at what times, and try and like pair this, similar people that managers have typically scheduled. That takes learning, right? Like that the engines have to learn that. They have to learn the behaviors. They have to learn where you're trying to target from an efficiency standpoint, what things can be cut, what things can't be cut. And that's not immediate. But I think you're 100% right. Like when people come in their guns a-blazing, we try and pump the brakes a little bit to try and just make sure they understand like that this is a process.
When we talk about, and I think going back to kind of COVID and, coming out of COVID, obviously safety is a big, kind of a pillar now for everybody from a restaurant perspective. And I think that not only is guest safety, I think it's employee safety as well too. And so really starting to look at, you see a shift of technologies going to more of a mobile first, and pushing some of the technology off to, employees, personal devices where you might have had a time clock before, or you're starting to see POS shift to being able for employees to do, run POS on their own devices, which is really scary for a lot of people, right? Because there's this mindset of security and, if they're using their own device, what does that mean? And you're kind of going through that kind of mindset. How do you, and I know tools like yours, kind of push it out to kind of, being able to employees have some of that self-control. What guidance can you give people who are like really kind of uneasy about this kind of mobile first mindset? And, how do we ease some of their fears to get there?
It's been a long time coming. I think I think if anything, COVID just propelled the technological revolution for some of these companies, right? There's a number of companies that were doing pay at the table, scan a QR code before COVID hit. This wasn't a new concept, but man, did they get adopted quickly when COVID hit. And then every legacy player was like, oh my God, we need to do this. And so I think the customers are probably adapting. Like the consumers are adapting quicker than probably the operators are. But at the end of the day, like there's going to be, there's good reason to do certain things on the mobile app as it relates to staff and health, right? If you're a point of sale company and you've got it, we're in a COVID world, so people are always touching the tablets, and do you want to make sure that someone's standing there wiping it down after someone punches in, or do you want to just let them use their own device to clock in a geofence area? I think that's something that folks need to be more open to, because the risk of them getting shut down for transmitting anything is like, it's like a death sentence, like if it makes the headlines, like, you're in a city, it's smaller, so there's like an outbreak at a restaurant, people probably won't eat there for a long time. It's unfortunate, but I think that you have to be a responsible operator and do everything you can to mitigate any type of risk, even if it's small, because it's not like you're already, riding crazy profits through COVID. It's going to take, if you're managing through it, it's going to take like a small nudge to potentially just topple you over for a long time. So.
No, and it's I think the other thing too is like, this is what employees are used to dealing with, right? Not like some very difficult, time clock, or, you even see where kind of POS is moving. You go to some of the legacy POS out there, and, they haven't evolved over time. And some of that is indicative of kind of the lack of investment in technology within in some of the restaurant space, right? But your employees would much rather use their phone than do, something else. They're much more comfortable. And so, hopefully we see that as a positive coming out, again, when you talk about very few silver linings, as an industry being a little bit more tech forward, and tech forward, not just to say you're tech forward to really start to use tools to drive increased profitability for, the restaurateurs out there. My last question is, we'll kind of end on this, and really the purpose of, this ebook and education for people is really to start to understand, I think and I read it in some of, the correspondence that we had before, and I actually used the expression yesterday, is, in the past, when you went out and looked at technology providers as a restaurant, because of some of the lack of integrations or maybe some of the legacy technology, that it was difficult for people to talk together, that people kind of tended towards, somebody who could do everything. And so, I think, jack of all trades, master of none is the expression you use. And I happened to use that yesterday as well, too, where today, restaurants have the opportunity to really look at focused areas and build this ecosystem. And you're seeing more and more players kind of play together in the space and making these integrations much more seamless. So the burden isn't necessarily on the tech side. It's really about building this kind of restaurant ecosystem that is, seamlessly talks together. And IT people hate the word seamless. So, I won't try and overuse it, but it really is getting to that, right? And, from your perspective as leading and being a thought leader in the industry, are you seeing more cooperation amongst some of these technologies, because people know that they have to start playing nice with each other and open up a little bit more to drive better value for the restaurants?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so thankful it's happening, because there's several older, more legacy players out there that are just kind of like, hey, we've got the stronghold, and we do these things. And there's just more innovation. There's more venture capital being like added to companies to really focus on doing things just incredibly well. And operators are seeing it, and they're like, well, I can only do this in this like all-in-one platform, but like, I want to use yours. Does it integrate? And so you're starting to see like, I want that function, but I want the employees to sync, right? They want some basic information to sync, but this other products, i.e. ours, does the scheduling, the labor management, the communication, and theirs is more so now used as like the reporting back office, create your custom anything type of reporting system. And so, yeah, I think I'm excited by the amount of willingness to cooperate and integrate, because it is such a high value driver now. It's becoming table stakes, thankfully, in the industry, where it's like, you buy a point of sale, if it doesn't integrate with labor management or your inventory, it's like, well, why? Like,
yeah,
there's a ton of stuff out there that integrates really, really well, and you guys don't. So like, you either do it or like, I got to go elsewhere. It's becoming like, your product is great and simple and easy and it looks pretty, but if it doesn't work and talk to the other functions that inherently allow the entire organization to be successful, then it really doesn't matter a whole lot.
No. Anytime you have to kind of key things into multiple systems should be a red flag of saying, don't do that, right? I mean, you have to have that seamless flow of data. You shouldn't have to, add somebody in HR, add somebody in POS, add somebody in labor, set them up in, the inventory. Like, if you're starting to do all those things, then it's time to kind of take a step back and make sure that you've selected the right technology. So, and picking the right partners is really, and like, just the partnership is so important, because
not every partner will see the integration flow the way you see it and how it needs to be done, because they're maybe not as technical, or they maybe have like different skill sets, right? So I think it's really important to work together with them and making sure that they're willing to collaborate and give you those data points that you need to kind of like tie pieces together. I just think some people are still a little bit removed from what an ideal flow would look like. And that's just a really important thing to be able to articulate for the customer's sake.
I know the industry and restaurateurs are super appreciative of, leaders such as yourself having to start to bridge some of those gaps, right? Because it is a pain point. And I do think, you can ask anybody and people say, yeah, we can integrate, but it might be, a huge lift to do it. And they don't disclose some of those things during the during the sales cycle. So I think understanding those data flows and how it's going to get done is an important kind of best practice for people to do when they're selecting technologies.
Yeah, agreed.
Jordan, how, a little bit back to 7 Shifts, how do people get a hold of you? How do people engage with 7 Shifts? What's the best way to activate with you and the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a restaurant operator or manager and you want to take 7 Shifts for a spin for scheduling, communication, and labor management, just sign up at 7shifts.com. So it's the number 7 and then shifts like shift work. .com and yeah, just quick. It's like one-click sign up, and you're kind of put into a trial right away, and someone will reach out if you need a hand with anything to get you integrated with your point of sale and set up, and super easy. So just visit the website.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it, and look forward to see you where you take the industry in this space.
No worries. Thanks, Kelly.